Marstons Owd Rodger.
Life is too short to be drinking shitty beer.
Welcome to another edition of Bands, Bikes and Booze Reviews. I have got one here today from Marstons, and I've been trying to get hold of this for ages. This is the Marstons Owd Rodger. And when I say old, I don't mean O-L-D, it's O-W-D here. If you can look at the label, you see that's how it's spelt. And that is old dialect, or a regional dialect for the word old. Now, Owd Rodger, or Owd Rodger, however you want to pronounce it, it's a character that nobody really knows about. There's no sort of history behind it. I'm sure it's based on something, but it's got lost in the midst of time, and even Marstons don't even know what it is anymore. According to them, this recipe goes back 500 years. But I would dispute that, because I have seen beer mats, old beer mats, that have advertising Owd Rodger, and it's saying that it's got a new taste. So to get a new taste, you surely must have altered the recipe. So that's why I would dispute that. Now, they're calling this a strong dark ale, and again, I have seen beer mats that advertise this as a barley wine. Personally, I would, at this sort of strength, 7.4%, and the characteristics of it, I would class this as an old ale. Now, old ale, and even the name as well, Owd Rodger, I think that gives some indication, as you know, that is an old ale. And you look at a lot of other old ales, and they have the word old in them. Old Tom, of course, being the prime example from the Robertson's Brewery. But there's others as well, and a lot of American brewers are brewing old ale now, and they always put the word old in the names of the beers to give you an indication that it's a strong, dark ale. So they have got that right, I will say that. Now, Marstons, of course, do they need an introduction? Well, not really. You know, people have a bit of a downer on Marstons, and, you know, they have taken over quite a good few breweries in their day. They've taken over the Witchwood Brewery, taken over the Ringwood Brewery, Banks's, I think they've taken over, and there's a few other little small ones. Wainwright, I think, is another one, etc. And they've also bought some beers off certain breweries as well. I think they bought Lancaster Bomber. That was bought off of Theakston's. Was it Theakston's or Thwaites? I can't remember. It's one of them two. It's one of the ones beginning with T. I think it might be Thwaites, actually. Anyway, Marstons are big, and they recently merged with Carlsberg. I did a bit of a video on that merger with Carlsberg. If you want to look that up, it will tell you a little bit about the merger, where Marstons are now, because I think they were in a bit of trouble financially at the start of this COVID stuff, and Carlsberg have come along, and they've effectively bought the majority sharehold on that. But there's big plans. They plan to make, I thought this was going to result in some redundancies. Apparently not. Carlsberg are talking about expansion. This was pre-COVID, so who knows what's happening to Marstons now. I really should look up the news on that, but that's by the by. Let's investigate this beer. This is Marstons Owd Rodger. I'm just going to pronounce it Owd Rodger, because you're not really going to hear the difference if I say ode and old. But there it is, and that label has changed over the years, and originally it was like some sort of farm worker, some really old type, you know, 19th century farm worker who was on the cover of that, depicting who was supposedly Owd Rodger. It has previously been billed as a barley wine, as I mentioned earlier. It was originally 7.6%. It has now gone down to 7.4%. You could buy this in a barrel years ago from an agent in London. I have seen advertisements for it for an agent in London. And you can buy, they called it, what was it, a luxury in the home. It was drawn from a big barrel, put into a little, what they called a baby barrel, and that was sent over to wherever you lived, and you would draw off that. And it would mature in the barrel as well. So, you know, this has got some history to it, but it's always been brewed by Marstons. And yeah, they say the recipe is 500 years old, and it was around at the time of Edward I. I would dispute that. You know, they've lowered the ABV, and, you know, I have seen the original advertisements saying that it's got a new taste on it. So, you know, I would question it when they say it's the original recipe. But there it is. It's a 500ml bottle, and they call it a strong dark ale, and I'm going to call that an old ale because effectively that's what it is. It was billed as a barley wine, old ale. The names are interchangeable. Let's get it open. I've been trying to get hold of this for ages, and I had to get it from, I think it was either Beers of Europe or Noble Green. It was one of the two anyway, but doesn't really matter. Here it is now. Now, of course, if you're not familiar with the old ale style, just think Old Peculiar, Old Tom, as I said before. But basically any barley wine or any strong ale, old strong dark British ale, you know, around the sort of between 6 and 8%. And that's what it would look like that. We're getting on the nose. Wow, a lot of caramel malt for starters. But that's about it. The aroma is quite subdued, and it's sort of what I'd expect from Marstons. I must tell you this quick story. A guitarist in our band, who was the one who reminded me of this beer, and he was telling me about the time they used to sell this on draft in their local, and he didn't realise how strong it was, and he was drinking loads of it one night, and he used to ride an old Triumph chopper, and he had a few of these, and I definitely would not recommend this, and I don't condone this either, but he had a few of them, got on the bike, went tearing off down the road, and he said he woke up the next morning, he said he hurt quite a lot, and he said there was a note in his pocket. Some passing motorist had seen him go into a field, took him home, found his address, took him home, left a note in his pocket saying where his bike was and what had happened. He had no recollection of it whatsoever. Very dangerous thing to do. Would not condone that at all, but he did it. But he said, yeah, I was drinking that stuff. I can't remember what it was called, Owd Rodger or something like that. And I went, oh yeah, Christ. You don't want to be drinking that and getting on a bike. Or you don't want to be drinking on a bike, full stop. I definitely don't recommend that. There it is in a glass. Looking a lot like a barley wine or an Old Peculiar. Yeah, anything else on the nose? Yeah, just caramel malt. And there's some fruit on there as well. Getting some fruit there now. Oh, and some little hints of spirit alcohol, some ethanol on there. Anyway, proof is in the tasting. So, let's get it down the hatch. You're good elf. Cool. Spirit alcohol or ethanol is definitely present in that. Now I took this out of the fridge about 3/4 of an hour ago, and it is just vaguely chilled. I think this is about the right cellar temperature for it, and I'm getting quite a lot of flavours on there. Wow. Caramel and toffee malt. There's quite a bit of toffee malt on there. There is big spirit alcohol and the warming as it's going down as well. There's a lot of dark fruit on that, like fruit cake, if you can imagine that. Them sort of raisin, dark cherry, sultanas, but just the dark fruit type flavour. But I'm also getting a liquorice in there as well. It's very subtle, but I can definitely taste it. It's quite nice, but the flavours are a bit subdued. And I have to say that where I thought this was going to be really, really, you know, bursting with flavour, they're just all toned down a little bit. But it's not bad, I have to say. The carbonation, that's why I'm swilling it about. There is a lot of carbonation on that. And the head, of course, is dissipating. I wouldn't have expected that to hang about for a long time with that alcohol in there. God, I'm really getting that licorice on the end of it. There's lots of toffee malt and dark fruit before that, and spirit alcohol running through it, but everything is toned down a bit. There is also like a treacle type sweetness to it, or molasses. That's what I'm looking for, not treacle, molasses type sweetness to it as well. It's not bad. You know, people knock Marstons and say that their stuff's it's crap, you know, it's macro brewed and all that. That isn't bad. That isn't bad. Don't get me wrong, it's not outstanding, but it's quite drinkable. I still think the best old ale I've had, I think that would have to go to either Old Peculiar or Adnams Tally Ho. Them two were neck and neck. Now, I had some of the Old Peculiar on draft in the Wetherspoons a while back, and it was really nice. It was like this, with the volume turned up and the flavour, but there was big spirit alcohol in that, and I'm sort of getting that in here, but all the other flavours just seem to be a bit muted, a bit blunted, if you know what I mean. But it's not bad. That's quite drinkable, and I think I could drink a couple of them. Few of them would be a bit too much. It's one to savour. It's like a winter warmer. And again, winter warmer is another, in my opinion, it's another sort of subcategory of old ale. Normally high alcohol, big dark fruit, lots of caramel and toffee malt, and you know, the warming on it. And, you know, in this case, the licorice. But yeah, not a bad effort from Marstons, I have to say. Reasonably impressed with that. So what's the verdict on Owd Rodger? Yeah, I've been trying to get this hold of this for ages, and people have been telling me you can get this in supermarkets and all that. I have not seen it in a supermarket around here at all. So I had to eventually get it online. And I'm glad I did, because I quite like it. It's not the best, don't get me wrong, it's not the best old ale I have tasted, but it's certainly a good, solid old ale. And it's got all the characteristics of it, you know, the big toffee malt, the big spirit alcohol, or the ethanol backbone that's on there, which is quite warming as it goes down. And you've got all the dried fruits, like, you know, like a fruit cake type, you know, Christmas cake is probably more of an accurate description. You've got the molasses type sweetness to it, and then there's that licorice that, you know, is detectable in there, which is quite subtle. But everything has been a little bit muted, I think. If them flavours were bigger, I think, you know, I'd be ranting and raving how great this is. But I think it's just been like a lot of Marstons beer, the flavours have just been a bit subdued. When I didn't get the big aroma from the beer, I was, the alarm bells were sort of ringing there a little bit, but it's still good. I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. It would have got more if the flavours were just bigger. Possibly even a 9, maybe a 9, possibly even a 10. But the subduing of all them flavours, I suppose when you're brewing in batches as big as they're doing it, you just can't get them big flavours. And I think this is seasonal as well. And I looked on the Marstons website and it's not on there. They haven't got it on there. So I don't know what's going on with that. Maybe they're phasing it out. Maybe Carlsberg have said, you're not brewing this shit anymore. So I'm glad I've tried some. Better late than never. So yeah, that's going to get an 8 out of 10. I definitely recommend it. There's better old ale out there. As I say, Old Peculiar, Tally Ho are the two that immediately spring to mind. There's others as well, some of the obscure ones, and some of them winter ales like the Sam Smith's Winter Warmer and the Shepherd Neame Christmas Ale, both really, really good. I'd class them as old ales as well. They're quite high in alcohol. I think the Shepherd Neame one is 7%, or it's in the late 6s or something like that. But yeah, it's not bad. Yeah, 8 out of 10, and I recommend it. And remember, beer is working class champagne.